Well, my friends, at long last, the time has come. I have talked about the atrocity known as Ralph Breaks the Internet and how horrendously it serves as a sequel to the original masterpiece. I have controversially discussed my personal disdain for the movie The Aristocats and why I think it is personally a disaster of epic proportions. But now, the time has finally come to finish the Disney Unholy Trinity with the third and final film, the stupidest Disney movie ever made, Home on the Range. Although I probably should address a few things about this being the last movie in the Unholy Trinity. First of all, just because this is the last movie I discuss doesn't necessarily mean that it is the worst of the three movies. This seems to be a misconception that people had when I made my Aristocats video, and I can perfectly understand why. You generally expect someone to talk about things from least bad to most bad when you're doing a specific video series.
That's not it.
But if we're talking specifically what is the actual worst movie, that would probably go to Ralph Breaks the Internet. Although on a personal level, I would rather watch that than The Aristocats myself. But The Aristocats is less objectively bad than Ralph Breaks the Internet, if you get what I'm trying to say. And as for Home on the Range, I would probably put that somewhere in between the two movies in terms of objectively bad. Although, in my opinion, it is the most watchable of the three movies. So ironically, we've been going technically from least watchable to most watchable, but this one is only in the middle of the two in terms of how bad it is. And with that cleared up, I'd like to clear up another thing. That being, what about Chicken Little? What about Dinosaur? And any other movie that you can think of that somehow didn't make the cut for the worst movies list. Those two, as well as Frozen 2 being the three main ones that I could see people bringing up. And none of them are good movies for the record, but they all have something that puts them above the actual Unholy Trinity movies. Frozen 2 is absolutely terrible from start to finish. But as a movie, I just don't care about it nearly as much as I care about these other three movies, which I find more insulting personally. And that's probably because I've never really cared about the original Frozen all that much in the first place. If you want, you could call it the honorable mention or secret hidden fourth unholy movie, but I don't know if I'll actually end up discussing it in a video. Maybe if I also do the first movie, I'll cover that one as well. But for now, it doesn't count. And then there's Dinosaur, which I'm sure a lot of people are thinking of because of the fact that it ranked in dead last on that Schaefer-list Disney ranking video. And while I don't find it to be a particularly thrilling movie either, being boring doesn't actually make you the worst movie ever, in my opinion. But I do, yet again, understand if you think this is the worst because it's boring, because to a lot of people, being boring is the worst thing a movie or piece of media in general could be.
If it's not fun, why bother?
After all, you go to these things for entertainment, don't you? But from a critical perspective, there's less bad in Dinosaur, and there's a lot of stuff that I kind of appreciate. I like that it tries to do a completely different and new style that's unlike any other movie. Most of the characters are pretty inoffensive at best, only that one love monkey character or whatever is the only one who's actually pretty bad. I mean, the villain dinosaurs, they're actually pretty terrifying, so I would say that's something the movie succeeds at efficiently. So for me personally, even though there are others out there who think it is the worst Disney movie ever, I would only say it's like the 5th or 6th worst Disney movie ever. Like, it's bad, but it's not that bad. And of course, last and probably most infamously, Chicken Little. Another movie that I've seen tons of people bring up, that they were certain would be one of the movies in this trinity. And going off of the majority of what happens in that movie, you'd be just about right. However, there is one thing in Chicken Little that stops me from hating it as much as all these other movies. A saving grace, if you will. That being, Chicken Little himself is actually a pretty good character. Like, I get that people are upset that he gets bullied all the time, but he himself doesn't actually do anything wrong in the movie. And I don't mean like he's a perfect character. I mean, he's not annoying or poorly written or anything terrible, really. It's just everyone and everything else around him that's so bad. But every time I watch Chicken Little, I still find myself rooting for him. So I can't, in good faith, put Chicken Little in the Unholy Trinity if it has something as notably good as Chicken Little, the main character himself, compared to all these other movies where I struggle to to find even a single good thing to say about them. And now, with all of that out of the way, we can finally start discussing the absolute abomination that is Home on the Range.
How bad could it be?
Remember the sleigh crash of '64?
That bad?
Worse. Look!
Now that's bad.
The first and arguably greatest problem with this entire movie is that it is clearly supposed to be a comedy, but it is quite simply not funny in the slightest.
The comedy in this movie falls so flat, it's not even funny. Like, I mean that literally, the movie is not even funny. It thinks it is, but it's not.
Been waiting a long time to give you this. Telegram. Oh, howdy.
Look, it's funny because the short guy has a super deep voice. Get it?
Some might say that comedy is very subjective, and me not finding it funny is just a point of view. And while said people are right that comedy is subjective, and indeed this movie does have a few fans out there, I genuinely believe that it's not just the kind of jokes that are made that leads me to not like them, but more importantly, the way in which those jokes are delivered that completely fails.
This is a crime against humanity.
You need look no further than the opening moments of the film to see what I mean. Just after the opening song starts, we immediately see this jackrabbit character pop out of a hole, get slobbered on by a wolf, run and get stuck under a cartwheel, then get flung across a herd of cattle, poking himself on their horns and landing in a nest, where his head gets pecked on by a bird and then gets booted out by them until he ends up under a skull, where a snake inexplicably ends up on his head, and then he runs away while being sucked on by this snake. All of this happens in the span of 30 seconds, by the way, which first of all is way too little time to take in all this information and comprehend what is happening. But secondly, it doesn't allow any of these individual moments, which might be funny on their own, Looney Tunes style, to actually land, because before you even have a chance to laugh, assuming you actually found any of this funny, it immediately moves on to the next shot. Even though all of that is presented in a way that is supposed to be comedic, it fails to even understand what makes a joke funny in the first place. The first reason it fails is because we don't know who this character is, so his misfortune is not funny because we need a reason to find his misfortune funny before we even consider laughing. If the scene had instead established that this jackrabbit character was a jerk who deserved this misfortune, then it would be funny. Or if the joke was that he just can't catch a break and no matter how hard he tries, he can't find a safe spot to call home, then it might be funny. But this information is missing. Even when we see the character return later in the film, the added context of who he is still fails to fill in this gap. He is neither a jerk, nor has he specifically had great misfortune in finding a safe home. He has simply been run out of his original home. In fact, this information arguably makes the joke even worse, because he is in fact a character who does not deserve this misfortune. And the intro sets up the expectation that this is a very silly character, when in fact he is probably the most normal character in the movie, out of the animals anyways. Also, I would like to mention that another problem with this opening is that it focuses way too much on this stupid rabbit character. You'd think he must be some super important character with how the opening puts so much attention on him. But no, he doesn't even show up in the movie again until over halfway through it. And he barely even does anything important once he does show up again. I don't understand why the intro wasn't focused on Maggie and how she ended up becoming the only cow to escape Alameda Slim. That would have both been more plot relevant and shown us a potentially interesting scene that is instead relegated to vague flashbacks. Now, the second major problem I have with this movie, and something that applies to far more than just this intro, but the entire movie, is that the movie is too stylized. It seems to think that over the top equals funny, and we can see that very clearly in this intro, but also all throughout this movie as well. I like some good cartoon logic, but this movie goes way too far sometimes. It's like no one can just stand still and talk. Something wacky always has to be happening, or it's not cartoony enough. I have a theory for why this movie is always so in your face with its cartooniness. I believe that Disney is overcompensating for the fact that this movie is not 3D like more successful animated movies. I feel like they have begun to believe a self-told lie that because this movie and most of their recent output were traditionally animated 2D movies, that they somehow had to justify them being 2D instead of 3D. And thus, they decided to go way overboard with the cartooniness 2D-ness in this movie so that it would stand out from the 3D movies due to being able to showcase styles and movements that 3D can't easily replicate. Unfortunately, they seem to have forgotten that an animated movie doesn't have to conform to specific rules for how it looks visually just because of its art style and process of animation. Speaking of art style, I'm going to be honest, the animation in this movie is not that appealing to me. The characters feel overly flat and lack depth. Yet again, this feels like something done to make the movie stand out from 3D animation, since intentionally making the characters look flat and 2D is the exact opposite of 3D. Unfortunately, it's also less appealing, to me anyways. I much prefer Disney's traditional animation that is so well defined and shaded that it genuinely almost looks 3D. Just look at some of these clips from movies like Pinocchio, The Rescuers Down Under, The Princess and the Frog, or Beauty and the Beast. Then, look at Home on the Range again, and you can clearly see what I mean. So, yeah, not objectively a flaw with the movie or anything, but it's just something that rubs me the wrong way. Speaking of rubbing me the wrong way, how about that amazing first joke of the movie, am I right?
Yeah, they're real. Quit staring.
Boob joke in the first 2 minutes of the movie. That's how you know what we're in for.
I genuinely don't know why they thought it would be such a good idea to make the first joke of the movie about breast implants. I know kids won't be able to understand what she means, but I'm still gonna dock points from this movie for even using this kind of crude humor. Also, an adult joke being the first one of the movie is a terrible idea, because it gives families the wrong impression of what the movie is going to be like. It could also cause people to immediately stop watching if they think Disney is willing to stoop to such low humor and possibly even abandon the company altogether. I'm probably exaggerating a little, but it's still a bad idea. Adult jokes are something I almost always hate, no matter what. I just don't find jokes about inappropriate topics funny in general. But at least leave a joke like this in the middle of the movie, where it would both stand out less and be more forgivable by most audiences, since, assuming they even liked the movie in the first place, they would already know that the majority of the movie is not made up of jokes like that, because it would be halfway over, and they could confirm its family-friendly nature by that point. Okay. That's probably more time than any sane person ought to be spending on a single cringy joke at the start of a movie. However, the question still remains, why even include a joke like this in a Disney movie in the first place? Disney isn't exactly known for including adult jokes in their movies, and if they are significantly more subtle than this. Well, I'll tell you why. It's because Disney was intentionally trying to emulate the success of Shrek. Massive issue number 3, Disney doesn't know what kind of a movie they actually want to make. Think about it. This movie would likely have begun production shortly after Shrek came out, and because Shrek was so successful and became such a cultural phenomenon, Disney would obviously want to emulate that success. The problem is that Shrek was deliberately designed to mock and play off the cliches of classic fairy tales, which is exactly the kind of movies Disney is known for making. On top of that, the occasionally crude nature of Shrek was done to demonstrate that a person's heart is more important than their outward appearance or mannerisms. None of this translates well to Home on the Range. Firstly, because Maggie is not Shrek, and her making crude remarks only makes her less likable and has no implications for her role in the story. It is also just a terrible first impression. Additionally, when it comes to Disney trying to emulate the style of a movie that Shrek was, they are still hesitant to stray from the expectations of their audience. This movie is essentially Disney trying to make a non-Disney movie, but keeping all the Disney tropes. The primary example of this being the songs in this movie. Yes, this movie has songs in it, which is of course what most people would expect from a Disney movie since most of their movies have songs in them. The problem is, only one of these songs has any purpose in the plot and all of the songs are bad.
Another pointless song. I mean, we just had a song too.
The addition of these songs to the movie feels like the creators were forced to add them in because, well, we have to have songs in the movie or else it isn't a Disney movie. See what I mean? And the opening song of the movie is extra pointless because, once again, it takes the spot of what should have been a dedicated introduction to Maggie and the villain. Speaking of Maggie, that brings me to the second point. The main characters being animals in this movie is irrelevant to the story. What I mean by this is that you could very easily rewrite the plot to make the trio of cows and the horse and the rabbit all human characters instead, while keeping the story mostly the same. The villains of the movie are already humans, for Pete's sake. As far as I can tell, the only reason these characters are animals at all is because the main characters have to be animals, or else it isn't a Disney movie. This whole movie just feels like Disney wanted to make a movie like Shrek, but was too afraid to abandon everything they were known for. So instead, we get this jumbled up mess.
Oh, suddenly you know my character's better than me? Forget it. I'm no sellout. I just crassly calculated commercial appeal in a mad quest for financial gain. No. My artistic integrity and I are out. Peace!
Massive mistake-o, number 4. Every character is annoying. Ah yes, we have reached what is debatably the most aggravating issue with this movie. Arguably its biggest failing, the complete and utter lack of any likable characters whatsoever. Let's start with Maggie. She is completely and absolutely self-obsessed throughout this entire movie, and I mean the whole movie.
You're so conceited.
I'll take that as a compliment.
This and making fun of other people are virtually her only character traits.
And see beautiful downtown Chugwater if you went to the county
I just love how this
fair.
character loves to shout out everything she says, so everyone will notice her.
Not only is this a bad idea for a main character, but it is an extra bad idea for a character who hardly learns anything or has any growth by the end. She is genuinely insufferable. I can't think of a single scene in which she was ever remotely likable.
Stop!
Well, if you're in charge, I'll take that as a compliment. And if you're not, I guess I'll just have to sit on you.
Is that supposed to be funny? Oh, are we supposed to like this character?
What is this you've got here?
It's neither funny nor endearing. This character is just so unlikable.
She is up there with Thomas O'Malley, Gurgi, and Ralph Breaks the Internet's versions of Ralph and Vanellope for most unlikable characters in a Disney movie. You can see just how insufferable she is when she arrives at the farm near the beginning. She constantly pushes herself into scenes with other animals and somehow manages to turn all these scenes into ways for her to show off.
I love when characters show off and it's supposed to be endearing.
Did I mention that she also likes to burp for some reason? Cause, you know, burping is so funny.
That was good.
Wow, crude humor is so awesome.
It was pretty cool, huh?
If by cool you mean utterly repulsive, then yes, quite cool indeed.
Oh, and speaking of the other animals in this farm, they all suck and basically have no importance to the plot whatsoever. They all only show up here at the beginning, maybe like 2 cutaway scenes in the middle when the movie is trying and failing to make us feel bad for them, and at the climax when they will all pretend like these are all iconic characters and get to pitch in their final part for the finale. Of course, none of that will be earned, because all we see of them here is how much they all seem to dislike each other and constantly fight amongst themselves. Oh, and of course, more bad jokes like this one.
Hey, that can is a family heirloom.
Whoever wins is getting a free tetanus shot.
Oh,
Okay?
I literally don't understand what is supposed to be funny about this. Yeah, he already has plenty of cans, but it's not like collecting cans is inherently funny, and the way the joke is delivered is so flat that it hardly feels like they're even trying to make it funny. There's simply just a complete lack of comedic timing here. Anyways, I should probably mention the other 2 cows who will unfortunately be joining Maggie on this adventure. Meet Inexplicably British Cow and Idiot Cow. Let's start with the Brit.
don't you love how the proper character has a British accent? Because all British people are so proper.
Come on, Grace.
Get it?
We've got a farm.
Mrs. Caloway, as she is actually called, is a character who only has one character trait, that she is a proper British citizen who happens to live smack dab in the middle of the American Wild West. This isn't even played as a joke. It is literally just that she is British for no discernible reason and happens to live here despite that not really making any sense.
How do we find the sheriff's office when we get into town?
Elementary, my dear Grace. If we find Buck, we find the sheriff.
Oh.
That horse is a legend in his own mind.
The British character says, elementary, my character.
I genuinely don't know why she is British other than they wanted to have one of the cows be a proper lady. And don't you know? All British people are proper. Technically, she has another trait, but it's so gimmicky I hesitate to even call it a trait. But that is to do with her hat. Let's just say she is very obsessed over this hat. And I kid you not, this will be plot relevant later in the movie. And now for the other one.
Oh dear.
I assume that Grace, the last of the 3 cow ladies, is supposed to be the glue that holds the other 2 stubborn cows together. She is more like that person who takes 10 whole seconds to realize what you meant when you say something that should be really obvious.
There are a few anger...
No answer.
She is simultaneously the character who contributes the most and the least to the plot, because as a character on her own, she barely does or says anything important, but because of contrived reasons, she becomes instrumental in defeating Alameda Slim. But most of the time, we just have to suffer through her almost always stupid and nonsensical talking, or worse, the singing. This is genuinely one of the worst trios I have ever seen. Like, they really thought, let's make a movie about a trio of cows. One of them will be a selfish, annoying jerk. One will be a selfish, stubborn fool, and the other will be a lighthearted idiot, and only the first of these 3 characters will ever be relevant to the plot. Oh yeah, that's something else I didn't mention. That basically only Maggie ever does anything important, except for a single scene each near the end where the other 2 do one semi-important thing, that being to make earmuffs for the other cows and break open a door in rage, respectively. Yeah, I've been waiting for this part. If you think I haven't already shredded into this movie enough, just you wait, because the story of this film is one of the most nonsensical things I have ever seen. So, let's see. How does the plot of this movie start again? Oh yeah, saving the stupid farm that I couldn't care less about. Problemo number 5. The plot fails to make us care about the farm.
Sam, this is my
I love how this movie tries to make it all emotional after only having just started and not at all endearing us to any of the characters. I just couldn't care less if this place got auctioned off or not.
Behold, my I don't care-inator!
We only spend a grand total of insert number of minutes at this stupid place before the main characters up and head out to save it. I don't even have a good idea of who the farm owner lady even is. I can't even remember her name, for Pete's sake. The only thing I could actually tell you about her is that she is nice, and is sad about the thought of losing her farm and animals, and thus, by extension, cares. But she is otherwise personalityless.
They can't take my place. Why, I've been hit through twisters, blizzards. Sam, this is my home.
Why should I care about this farm if I don't even care about the woman who owns it? And I certainly don't care about any of the idiotic animals we've already discussed. Therefore, I am willing to bet a good portion of people watching this movie are completely uninvested in the plot of this movie. I should also mention that the plot fails to make us believe that Maggie cares about the farm, because she literally just showed up minutes ago. She is basically incapable of being able to have formed a connection to anyone here. Literally all her scenes so far have been her showing off to the other animals. She doesn't actually care about them, only herself. So why should I believe that she actually wants to save this farm? Later, they try to retcon her motivation to be revenge against Alameda Slim, but this doesn't work on any level whatsoever either. First of all, she doesn't have any idea that Alameda Slim is after her farmland.
In fact,
Alameda Slim himself doesn't even know that he's after this land either, because of another stupid scene we'll get to later. On top of this, Maggie has no way of knowing Alameda Slim is the one buying up the farmland. All she knows is that he kidnaps cattle, and he hasn't done that to this farm, so there is currently no connection between Alameda Slim and the farm, for Maggie to want revenge against him being the motivation for her leaving to save the farm. Her desire for revenge is also undercooked, because we never see how Alameda Slim affected her, only brief flashbacks. So even if her motivation was revenge, it would be the most underwhelming revenge story of all time. So in the end, it just feels like she is doing things because the plot says so. Oh, and also there is this brief dumb scene where Mrs. Caloway refuses to join the other 2 at first.
What's her specialty? Sour cream?
I love how we're supposed to side with the obnoxious character and think the one who's lived here all her life is in the wrong somehow.
But these cringe chicks guilt trip her into joining.
I know what you're going to say, that Maggie and Grace will need someone with my eye for detail to keep them on the straight and narrow. Say no more. I'll go.
Well, that's the only reason she goes to. It's because of self-importance.
It's all very pointless stuff which only seems to exist to delay the inevitable. You'd think this is because the movie is building up some sort of character flaw for Mrs. Caloway, but no, you'd be wrong, because Mrs. Caloway will be no different here than at the end of the movie, a problem I will discuss more so when we get to the end. But of course, this just gives Maggie more ammo to be a jerk, and be treated like she's in the right for doing so. Just because you have a good idea doesn't mean you get to insult other people for not instantly agreeing with you. Well, either way, off they all go to the fair. This fair plotline will of course be dropped not even 10 minutes after being introduced because of some more great writing. But first, a painful singing scene. Remember when I said that Grace sings and that it would be worse than her talking? Well, here is all the proof you need.
You better hurry up around that mountain, because I cannot take this much longer.
This also serves as yet another example of this movie's failed comedy, since once again, this is supposed to be funny. But I must ask, what part about a person singing horribly off tune and annoying other people is funny?
Idiots!
What's that? The funny part is that she thinks she's singing on tune and everyone else is a horrible singer? Well, that doesn't actually make the joke funny. It just means that this character is even stupider than we already thought. Gee, I sure love scenes that make unlikable characters even more unlikable.
Literally the worst trio of all time right here. Because watching a group of characters who are completely unlikable or irritating is the best idea for a movie ever invented.
But none of these cows have anything on the actual worst character of this movie.
She looked like she had never seen anything quite so horrible in all her life.
Yes, that's right. There is someone who is even worse than these three somehow. Meet Buck, the bane of my existence.
Like, this guy actively just makes me mad. It's not even so bad it's good funny or anything, you know? Like, no. Like, actively, like, genuinely might be the most annoying character in any Disney movie ever, period. Like, even more annoying than Frozen 2's version of Olaf. He's that bad.
Big bad number 6. This flooping horse.
Who put this here?
So funny. Who put this here? The joke's never been made before in the history of jokes.
You see, this guy only has 2 character traits in this whole movie. He is completely self-obsessed, and he is an idiot. Hey, wait a minute. That sounds familiar. I'm sure you can tell from that he is not only a character who is flat and boring, but he is also insufferable, and he's not just an average level of annoying. He's the kind of character who forces himself onto you, the audience, every time he shows up. It's like the animated equivalent of overacting.
Kicking bad guy behind.
So isn't it so funny when characters actively annoy other characters? Peak comedy.
And because he shares essentially the same unlikable traits as Maggie, it creates many situations where you must endure the most unbearable, self-obsessed arguing ever put to screen. But anyway, back to the stupid cows. Let me just take a moment to ask what this line is supposed to mean.
Look, there's no fences. What keeps the people from roaming?
They appear to be domesticated.
Is this movie actually trying to make me believe that these cows don't know they are owned by humans?
Oh! That's priceless.
And also completely and utterly unbelievable, and I genuinely mean that. It goes against their own goal in this very movie. They are trying to save their farm, but they know full well that only their human owner can save it by paying off the money. They are only getting the money for her, not themselves. And they should know full well their owner is not stuck behind the fences. She would not only have to leave to get food and supplies, but they literally see with their own eyes the sheriff walk up to the farm and leave it completely unfenced. I have no idea what the writers were thinking with this pathetic attempt at a joke. Is there any logic behind the joke?
No.
If there is no logic behind the joke, it doesn't work. Also, it's just not even a funny joke in the first place. It has no comedic timing, and it doesn't seem a natural thing the characters would say. But that is nothing compared to what happens next. I'm honestly not even sure how to describe the scene other than pure, unfiltered chaos.
What was that? It's a gunfight!
Literally, what is the point of what I'm watching right now? It's pure, unfunny, comedic shenanigans for the sake of nothing. Nothing at all.
Daddy! Son!
Comedy.
Ah, that went well.
What in the name of Ferb did I just watch? Not only is everything that happens from the cows thinking there are gunshots to them being kicked out of the bar completely random nonsense, but it ultimately means nothing. It's not funny, at least in any way other than an ironic way. It doesn't add anything to the story, and it doesn't tell us anything new about the characters or setting, since they basically just move on immediately like all that didn't just happen. Oh boy, more Buck scenes. It looks like he has appeared to initiate the most pointless argument of all time.
Well, if it isn't three maids a milking.
No, really, what is even the point of this argument other than to establish that he knows these three cows are here? The argument goes nowhere, and the characters are only made more unlikable by its existence.
What's that? What is that?
I believe you left this on our farm.
Wait, whoa.
She's literally incapable of saying something without being a complete condescending jerk.
Also, apparently, this dog's nose is magical because he can smell the number of dollars that are printed onto this paper.
750 of them.
Maggie, where are we?
How can he smell the number? That doesn't make any sense.
And because we haven't had enough random nonsense and chaos happen recently, suddenly Rico appears. The overly dramatic way this movie introduces this guy would probably make you think he is some really important character, but nope, it's another case like the rabbit at the beginning. Rico is not only barely in this movie, he is actually so pointless, you could very easily write him out entirely and have nothing change. Also, these close-ups of the flies leave me speechless and baffled, and I don't mean that in a good way.
Rico.
What were they thinking when they made this movie?
This brings me to another moment in this film which makes me roll my eyes. The convenient reward price for capturing the villain.
$750.
Yeah, I sure love the coincidence that he happens to be worth the exact amount of money they need to save their farm.
It's just too convenient. And the fact that not one, but two important things have the same dollar value makes the world feel more artificial and fake because coincidences like that almost never happen in real life. Plus, this coincidence could so easily be resolved by having the price be larger than $750. Also, if Alameda Slim really is such a big menace, which he is arguably much more than just a big menace based on later scenes, then he should surely be worth more than just $750. And yes, I do know that money back then was worth more than it is nowadays, but still, making him worth at least $800 would solve the coincidence problem.
Hey, Rusty, Rico's saddle. I'm wearing Rico's saddle. I'm wearing Rico's saddle. Great. I'll leave you two alone.
Oh, no.
Is there a way to permanently silence this guy?
Wait a minute, accidents can happen.
And speaking of coincidences, I can't fail to mention that in the very next scene, there just so happens to be a cart heading off to a cattle drive, perfectly ready to head off at this exact moment when the characters need it. Oh, and also Maggie is a greedy pig and a thief for stealing this guy's food off the back of his cart. She is never called out or punished for this, implying she was either in the right to do so, or that there was no harm in eating someone else's food without their permission. And that's not all, for Maggie is the worst cow ever moments in this scene. She also starts being a deliberate jerk to Mrs. Caloway by poking and pushing her against her specific request not to.
Come on, Caloway. It'll be fun.
Did you just hit me?
Kinda.
This isn't funny, it's just mean and rude, and Mrs. Calloway's reaction is justified. I also feel I should mention how Maggie upsetting Mrs. Caloway here will, and I am not joking with you here, be genuinely crucial to the plot of the movie, specifically her getting angry over her hat. This is one of those instances when in filmmaking they say, don't introduce a gun if you aren't going to shoot it, or something along those lines. The point being that every event that happens should be set up by a prior scene, and a scene that sets up something shouldn't lead to nothing. And so the only reason that this scene happens in the first place is so that Mrs. Caloway can get angry over her hat, therefore setting up the later scene where she breaks open the door in the same fit of rage over her hat. Which of course is all just one big gimmick to get the characters out of a later situation. And because the writers are so clever, they apparently couldn't come up with anything better than this as the setup for that later scene. Did I mention that Maggie also starts to fight back afterwards, as if she is defending her annoying jerk attitude and behavior? Please, movie, explain to me from what possible angle is this character likable? Also, this whole scene is just more of the characters fighting and not getting along. How the movie ever expects us to root for them as a team is beyond me. But don't worry, they stop fighting eventually, not because they came to their senses and apologize, but rather because they are literally forced to stop by the sheriff. Also, it sure is convenient that this character they are given to doesn't even speak English, so he can't tell them they aren't his. Isn't that just convenient? Also, it's probably not my place to say, but I do find it somewhat perplexing that the only Chinese character in this movie exists only to serve as a joke character who doesn't understand English. It just comes off as a bit, insensitive. I wouldn't call it outright racist or anything like that. Mostly just a side effect of this movie's many failed attempts at comedy. Ah yes, and speaking of failed comedy, we once again have to endure more of this abysmal singing, because the first scene wasn't enough!
Who thought this was a funny joke? Please, tell me. This is important information. I just want to talk to them. That's all.
There's only one thing to do. Oh, much better.
Okay, but the actual reason is because the writers think this is actually some hilarious joke and are trying to play it out with the rule of 3 in comedy. You know, that whole thing where a joke builds upon itself twice after its original use, reaching a miniature conclusion of sorts with how it's used in its final appearance. The problem here is that the way the joke is reused is no different than how it was in the first place, which means it not only fails to build upon the joke from its first use, but it's also just not funny because it wasn't even funny the first time. The only difference this time is that the Chinese guy reacts to the singing, ironically building more off the prior joke with him than the joke with the singing. But yet again, it's still not funny because the first joke with him wasn't funny either. Oh, and right around here, the movie really wants us to feel bad for Maggie, but it has done nothing whatsoever to actually convince me that I should be sad here.
It's so sad that the character who had everything lost everything they had. It's not like she deserved it.
Oh, and also, somehow, until editing this very video, I never noticed what should be obvious, and I'm sure a lot of you are going to say I'm stupid for not noticing this, but the fact that Alameda Slim's fake name, Yancey Odell, spells yodel when you take away all the other letters, as it appears on this sign. I guess I was just too busy laughing at how terrible everything in this movie is, that I missed this very obvious, clever joke by the writers. Uh-oh, it's time for the cringy creep cows, aka these flirtatious imbeciles. I honestly don't know what they were thinking when they added these characters.
Do these cows actually think they're being highly attractive? Because it's not even comedic, the level that they've portrayed them at. It's just insultingly stupid.
Not only are they worthless to the story, but they are just uncomfortable. I could almost understand if their point was to try and make fun of guys who think trying to flirt and hit on women they just met is attractive, but due to their reappearances later in the movie, this point utterly fails. And yes, for some unholy reason, these characters have to make a pointless return later on. Of course, they will still end up having done nothing in the story except be idiots who aren't funny, and that, of course, is the other problem. It should go without saying that these characters are another failed attempt at comedy. So even if they failed at representing idiot creepy guys, at least they could still be funny, but no.
Pardon me, but what are 3 lovely ladies like you doing on a drive like this?
Wow, totally original dialogue.
This movie is absolutely incapable of making anything funny.
I've killed it. Oh, everything I touch gets ruined.
Well, on to the next scene. Let's see, which one was that again? Oh, no.
You see, your little
Interesting maneuver.
Yep, it's time to discuss the pinnacle of this movie's nonsensical stupidity, the magical mind-controlling yodeling. Reason for the movie's suckage number 6. The hypnotic yodeling is pure baloney. Where do I even start with this scene? Oh yes, I know. The villain. Why is Alameda Slim's yodeling able to mind-control cows? No, seriously. I am genuinely asking how, because I do not know. This movie never explains how or why this is possible. Is his yodeling special somehow? It must be, surely. He is the only one who can do it. Or are all the cows just susceptible to yodeling, and he just so happens to be the only person who ever yodels in the entire American Old West? Has he somehow trained his voice to gain this special ability? None of this is ever explained. He can just do it because the plot says so, and haha, funny cowboy villain yodeled, haha, very funny.
This is simultaneously the best and worst part of this entire movie.
Secondly, how come his yodeling didn't work on Maggie when he first attacked her farm? Because, by some miracle, she was the only one who escaped that event. But here we can see that she clearly gets affected like all the other cows minus Grace. And speaking of Grace, how come she isn't affected? Oh yeah, that's right, because she thinks everyone else is a bad singer. Wait a second, that doesn't make any sense. Apparently, being tone deaf makes you immune to hypnotic yodeling. But if the hypnotic yodeling is so powerful, shouldn't it work on everyone, even if they are tone deaf, because it's so powerful? Whatever. What's more important is the sheer odds of the one and only cow who is immune to Alameda Slim just so happens to be one of the 3 main characters. How convenient. And we haven't even talked about the song yet. And by the way, this is the song I was referring to at the start when I said only one song has any effect on the plot or characters. And I think it's pretty obvious what I meant by that. Unfortunately, despite being the only relevant song, it may actually be the worst one in the entire movie. I will admit, it is so bad that it kind of becomes so bad it's good at some points, but most of it is just stupid lyrics combined with trippy visuals. But I do get very annoyed when he goes on a yodeling solo and the music writers just gave up or something, because instead of him yodeling to original music, he begins yodeling to renditions of classical music.
You see, the songwriters were so lazy that they couldn't even come up with an entirely original melody. They had to steal melodies from other famous songs to complete their soundtrack here. And on top of that, it's just cringy because this is not the context of the original songs, and it's not even comedic the way they're being used.
The so bad it's good element is completely gone in these parts. And on top of all that, there's just the pure nonsense of just what is even happening on screen. Like I said, this song gets very trippy, but not necessarily in a good way, more like the ending of the Three Caballeros way. But I don't actually care too much if the song is trippy. What I mainly care about is the utter nonsense that happens at the end. The insane way the cow trio escapes is beyond belief. The fact that Rico and the others all run like lightning out of nowhere as if they were there the whole time, and most baffling of all, Alameda's escape through this crack in the canyon wall. First of all, how did he fit all those cows through there so fast when they were literally dancing around in circles like a minute ago? Secondly, how is his spur so powerful that it could knock down this boulder perfectly into place to block the way? Thirdly, and most importantly, why is there an out-of-place rock formation perfectly placed to block this exit? That sure is convenient. Unless, of course, Alameda Slim actually planned all this, which would then imply that he and his men intentionally placed the rock there, or at least manipulated the formation perfectly for their escape, which would then further imply that he somehow knew this cow herder would come along this path at this exact time, and on top of all that, he would have to climb all the way up this mountain and back down again just to make sure his plan works.
Oh yeah, it's all coming together.
and because he would be forever blocking the path, there is no way he has ever done a plan like this before and never can again. So this isn't a tried and true method, it is genuinely a stars-aligned opportunity. You know, or it was just very convenient. Basically, this entire scene is quite possibly the biggest load of nonsense Disney has ever put to screen.
I love how lucky it is that all three of the main characters are the only cows to escape the hypnotism.
Well, anyways, now is when the good guys show up too late. I don't know why they just showed up out of nowhere. If they really were on the villain's trail, then you would think they would have arrived on time. But I suppose Mr. Yodelodel was just so loud they heard his singing from a mile away and came running.
Literally every time these characters interact, it's just them arguing with each other. Because apparently that was Disney's idea of, you know, entertainment when they made this movie.
But what I really care about is this frustrating scene right after they show up, where this idiot horse, Buck, actually gets what he deserves, and yet it's still not satisfying. And that's because this selfish jerk cow Maggie tries to rub in his failure afterwards, and essentially uses the opportunity to brag about how she is so much better than him.
Well, stud. Now, I'm no professional, but I'd say the only mono you'll be doing is in your dreams.
It's not even satisfying when this horse gets betrayed because this scene happens, where the character who's already so smug throughout this entire movie just gets to be even more smug. It takes away any sense of possible satisfaction.
Listen, movie, you can't try to give a selfish character what they deserve, only to have another selfish character use that as an excuse to prop herself up. This is taking away the satisfaction of him getting what he deserves, because if she is happy, I am not happy. And it just reverses the character development by essentially making one character worse in place of another one being better. Except, I forgot to add, this excruciatingly annoying travesty of a character learns nothing because of Maggie's bragging.
I wouldn't help you, bossy bovines, if my life depended on it!
Just shut up, shut up, shut up, shut it up.
Yep, that's right. Not only does Maggie take away the satisfaction of this event, she also causes this freak to retaliate by saying he doesn't need anyone to capture the villain and is so great that he can be the hero by himself. Great job, Maggie. That's minus an additional 5 points for both you and Buck. Meanwhile, at the villain's lair, I think it's probably time that I talk about the other terrible trio of this movie. A trio so bad, they actually give the cows a run for their money. These three nephew twins, or whatever they are to the villain, I genuinely don't understand why he doesn't just get rid of these three idiots. They don't ever actually do anything to help him at any point in the movie other than say stupid things and or distract him from focusing on getting things done. Like, these three idiots are actually the villain's true weakness. If he had gotten rid of them a long time ago, he'd probably be a lot more successful. Oh, and did I mention the mind-boggling stupidity of the trio here, being unable to tell who Alameda Slim is when he is disguised.
Who are you? What do you do with Uncle Slim?
Like, I get it's supposed to be a joke, but once again, it's not even funny. When a character is so stupid they can't comprehend basic logic, the joke doesn't work. Especially when the disguise is not even that effective. I can only assume that whoever wrote this movie assumed that idiots would be funny by default, but they seem to have missed what makes most comedy actually funny. Jokes are almost always funny because they are clever and unexpected. I mean, I sure wasn't expecting these characters to not recognize Alameda. I also wasn't expecting these characters to have the intelligence of a 2-year-old. No, that's too insulting to 2-year-olds. More like the intelligence of a zombified dodo bird.
This here is the disguise I used to sneak into all them auctions and buy all the land.
I love the villain explaining his plot that was already obvious from previous scenes that we saw in the movie. So the real question is, why is he explaining this? Is it just because his henchmen are so stupid? Shouldn't they already know his plan if they're working with him?
Also, I'd like to just question the logic behind Alameda's disguise as well. If even he doesn't even think it's a good disguise, what is the point? Wouldn't it make more sense to appear as himself normally and use the disguise when he is being the villain? After all, people are going to want to know who the person in charge of all the land he is buying is, and wearing a disguise in every public event would be pretty ridiculous. If he just swaps it around, it would be harder to tell who he is when he's being evil, and his wanted poster wouldn't have his normal face face on it, thus allowing him to pretend he is a normal person. Of course, I'm just kind of nitpicking here, but it really isn't something he or the writers really thought about, I imagine.
My singing. Songbirds sing. Saloon gals sing. Little bitty snot-nosed children sing.
The fakest drama of all time.
And yodeling is an art.
Oh, and guess what? That's not even the stupidest scene involving the three idiots over here. There's also the even more mind-bogglingly stupid scene where this absolute piece of work's head is the perfect shape, in the perfect position to block the spot on the map Alameda Slim doesn't have. And on top of that, he somehow always manages to sit perfectly in the exact same position every time at just the right angle and never relaxes or moves himself in any way, or else it would be possible to see the map behind him.
Gil? Uh-huh? Am I correct in assuming that each and every time we brought a herd back to this secret lair, you managed to sit in the exact same spot, blocking that choice piece of property from my view?
How is this even remotely possible? Does this idiot literally not have a life outside of sitting on this couch in the exact position for eternity?
You might have had a couple holes up here you needed some flex tape for, you know what I'm saying?
Surely he must move at some point, and at least once Alameda Slim should have been able to see this map. The odds of this never happening are absolutely staggering. Oh, and it should be said that Alameda Slim specifically refers to this place as his secret lair, but I don't understand how it can be a secret when it has a train track that goes straight through it.
Not a great plan.
That reminds me, I haven't talked about Alameda Slim's plan or motivation yet. Gargantuan issue number 7. Alameda is a terrible villain with no motivation and a lackluster plan. His plan is basically just to take all the cows, run farm owners out of business, and use the cash from selling the cows to buy out the land from the farm owners. Believe it or not, I actually don't have a problem with this villain plan on the whole, except for the fact that it's actually too good. As in, it's too well planned and realistic compared to this movie's wacky, cartoonish nature. It ironically isn't over the top enough to actually match the tone of the rest of the movie. However, there's a much larger problem with the villain of this film. Alameda doesn't have any motivation or backstory for what he is doing other than, I am greedy and mean. Like, genuinely, we know virtually nothing about him or why he is doing what he is doing.
But it's just a little old dirt farm. What's the difference when you're talking revenge?
You know, I've heard this all before, Samuel.
Every last acre counts.
Revenge. What does he have to get revenge on?
He's literally just a villain for the sake of being a villain.
It's like they saw, oh, he's a villain, therefore he must be seeking revenge in some reason or other. Because that's what villains do. They're the people who seek revenge. They never have any other motives. It's always revenge.
I mean, even other pure evil Disney villains have some sort of subtle motivation, such as Jafar believing he can rule Agrabah better than the Sultan, or the coachman believing that the boys at Pleasure Island deserve to be turned into donkeys. But this guy? Nope. It's not even explained what he plans to do with all the land once he buys it. How will he actually sustain it? If he is so rich that he can pay to keep the land maintained, why does he need to commit crimes to earn money? So you see, as soon as you start thinking about Alameda and his plan, everything stops making sense. Not that this movie ever made sense in the first place. Back to our heroes. And please, do not even get me started on this next section with all the side character animals from the farm.
Audrey, remember when Grace helped you figure out why you crossed the road? In Jan.
I love how we have to have a secondary character explain all the great things about the main characters instead of showing us them doing the good things themselves.
I don't think I need to tell you why this is bad writing. Show, don't tell, and all that.
Meanwhile,
I love characters who are so self-obsessed and obnoxious that they actively make it harder for other characters to do the right thing just so they can be the only hero.
Ah, yes, it's good to see Buck the Suck is still at it, making us hate him even more and more with every scene.
Remember, guys, this character, this horse who just left, he's not a villain. He's supposed to be a hero in this movie.
Just because he wants to be the one who captures the villain is no excuse for him to sabotage the others, and he never apologizes for this behavior later either. And now it's time for yet another argument. I tell you, that's all these characters actually do, argue.
But you, Maggie, are the biggest catastrophe to ever hit our farm.
Well, she's right about that.
They don't bond and get to know each other. They don't have fun together. They don't support each other.
We're heading straight home to Patch of Heaven.
But what about catching Slim?
They walk for miles and hours throughout the desert, and they're like, let's give up and go back.
Well, I'm out of here. If revenge storms don't succeed on the very first try, then we just give up.
They seem a right miserable bunch, and I'd hate to be stuck on a road trip with them. And speaking of this argument, this is the part where Maggie is accused of going after Alameda Slim for revenge instead of caring about the farm. And I already explained why this revenge thing doesn't make any sense earlier. But how come Mrs. Caloway has the gall to say Maggie doesn't care about the farm? Of course she doesn't! She hasn't even been there for one whole day before being whisked away onto this disastrous excuse for an adventure. That's like saying to an acquaintance you only recently met, I can't believe you won't donate money for my brother to go to college. You're so selfish. See the problem here. She is projecting her problem onto someone who doesn't have the same connection and attachment that she has. Sure, it was Maggie's idea, but can you really blame her for caring more about her old farm and what happened to that more than the new one she has only just been put into? Oh, and did I mention the song at this part of the movie? It is by far the most pointless song yet. Though it might be the best on its own as a song, that doesn't make up for how obviously shoehorned into the movie it was. And for what? The fakest drama anyone has seen ever? Oh yeah, and that reminds me, the problem number 8. The fakest drama ever seen in the history of drama ever. First of all, this song isn't sung by any of the actual characters, just like all the songs minus the yodeling one, which immediately makes it harder to care, as it isn't the thoughts and words of an actual character, but a vague narrator who is all but saying, this is the sad part. Feel sad. But what's worse is the extreme degree of sadness this song tries to reach.
Will the sun ever shine again?
What? Literally, what has even happened in the movie to justify lyrics like this? No, really, virtually nothing has changed since the characters have left the farm at the beginning. They haven't been separated, the villain might have stole some cows, but they didn't actually know any of them. All the farm animals back home are still in the same positions they were before. Nothing has changed!
If the movie thinks we're actually going to be sad or cry, then I genuinely don't know. Like, you can't make a movie that's this over the top in trying to be funny throughout, and failing, might I add, and then try to make you cry out of nowhere with absolutely no effort put into writing the characters or setting them up before trying to pull out all this drama.
No, but it's raining, and that automatically makes it sad. Ah, yes, of course. The only time it rains in this movie, and it's the sad scene.
Typical.
And don't even get me started on this dog guy feeling sad over Buck.
Wow, I feel so bad for this dog, even though his quote-unquote friend only ever annoyed him when he was there.
Literally, the only scene we have seen between these two has been one in which they seem to be reluctantly playing a game out of boredom and didn't actually care about each other. Are you now telling me they are actually friends?
Oh, that's a good one.
Also, I just love these scenes in movies where everyone is sad at the same time for some reason. Like, that just doesn't happen.
Well, now that that dreadful section, dreadfully boring to be specific, is over, we can now talk about the plot convenience rabbit of pure coincidence-ness. First of all, he shows up from literally nowhere, and just gives them food and advice perfectly when they need it. I mean, at least have this guy be shown to be following them or something, and feels bad until now when he finally confronts them. But no, he just appears without explanation because explanations are for losers, obviously.
I love how they have to force this jackrabbit into somehow having a connection to the main villain as well. Like, What does the main villain have against jackrabbits? That doesn't even make any sense.
So I have a question for you. Right when our heroes don't know what to do, how do you think the rabbit will help them out of this situation? Will they 1. Work with the rabbit to find the villain and stop him? 2. Argue with the rabbit and then force him to lead them to the villain? Or 3. The rabbit already knows where the villain is and will instantly take these strangers he just met straight to him? What are the odds that our main characters would just so happen to meet this guy in the middle of the desert anyways?
Isn't it convenient this guy just shows up when they need him the most to tell them exactly where to go?
Like I said, if they had just had him follow them on purpose, this wouldn't be a problem. You know, I've had it with dancing around this problem at the core of this movie, that the plot runs on pure coincidence and convenience. Big sin of the movie, number 9. The plot is run on pure convenience power. From Grace being the only one immune to Alameda, to the reward price for his capture, the chance encounter in the desert, the convenient Chinese guy heading to the cattle drive, the fact that Alameda had a convenient rock to block his escape route, this imbecile perfectly blocking the map so Alameda doesn't know about the 3 main characters' homeland up until now, protecting them, or of course, that the exact moment these 3 dweebs don't know where to go, this guy shows up. Good stories shouldn't rely on things like this to happen in order for the story to progress. A good plot is one in which characters make active decisions that lead them down the right or wrong path, and when a locked door blocks their path, they puzzle out a way around it. Bad plots are ones in which our heroes are guided along a path already laid out for them and handed the key to every door they come across for free.
Okay, what did you think? $1 million was just going to fall out of the sky?
It doesn't work that way.
Well, how does it work then?
You got us.
Wow, the greatest trio ever. Like, they actually expect us to think these characters have bonded together and become friends after all they did is argue and be obnoxious to each other throughout the entire movie up to this point? See, look how pointless that whole fake drama scene was when all the characters are immediately just continuing where they left off afterwards. It meant nothing. It was completely pointless.
But anyway, the gang head off to Alameda Slim's lair and meet this buffalo/bison character who serves as a guard. I'm not sure why he is working as a guard since he is essentially helping to betray his cousins.
Why is this bison guarding the gate? Like, if he works for Alameda Slim, how does Alameda Slim control him if he can't communicate with animals? Is this guy doing it just because he likes them? Right? I mean, clearly he likes the cows. But the question is, why would he be letting the cows in if he likes them? Because that just means they're going to the villain. It doesn't make any sense.
Can I also talk about how this buffalo scene is yet another scene of Buck getting what's coming to him ruined by Maggie? Yes, almost exactly as the last time. Buck gets screwed over, and yet we are unable to be satisfied by this because Maggie has to open her big fat mouth and rub in that he won't be let into the mountain.
Excuse me, reject coming through.
Oh! Which of course has the side effect of just making Buck more eager to prove himself.
It's hero time.
Shh! Did everybody hear that? Do you know what that sound was?
What?
That was the sound of my patience shattering into a billion little pieces.
Thus decreasing the likability of both characters even further, if you can believe that.
Like, there's literally yet to be a single scene with this horse where he's been a likable character in any way at all, period. I mean, speaking of which, there's still yet to be a scene where any of these characters have really been likable either, too. I mean, maybe almost likable for the other two, but not Maggie. Maggie is one of the absolute most obnoxious characters I think I've seen in movie history.
Put on my hat, then I put on my spectacles. Ah! Hey, who are you? Where's Uncle Sam? Oh, it's still me! Can't you stupid sack of hammers get it?
I'm starting to get as angry as him about how stupid these 3 imbeciles are. and them being stupid, it's not even a funny joke. They're literally just stupid and it's annoying. It's purely annoying.
Well, well, well. At long last, we finally get introduced to the only actually good character in this movie.
5,000 cows on the barrelhead as promised, Mr. Weasley.
The name's Wesley.
Hey, wait a second. That purple suit, the mustache, the purple hat. No, it can't be. Evil Rockotar, my twisted, scheming twin. Could it be you? Well, I suppose that explains why he's the only good character. And no one with a fashion sense like that could ever be a bad character. But for real, there isn't actually anything wrong with Evil Rockotar over here. He's the only character who kind of works. Although his role is minor, so it's not like he saves the movie or anything like that. Oh, look at the time. It looks like it's Chaos O'Clock. For real, this entire sequence from the cows entering and attacking Alameda all the way to their own capture cannot be described as anything other than pure chaos. Oh, and also, this is when we get literally the only funny line in the movie.
I gave up clown college for this?
It's not very surprising that Evil Rockotar is the only character in this movie to actually get a good line. After all, he does have a little bit of me in him. Also, guess what? Somehow, during all this, they managed to make Buck even more unlikable, because they have him manipulate this other horse into believing a lie that he told him in order to take his place.
Okay, thanks, buddy. I owe you one.
Godspeed, my friend. So long, sucker.
What a hero!
This horse guy is literally one of the most despicable characters ever.
Die, monster. You don't belong in this world.
What is a man? A miserable little pile of secrets.
But as for this scene itself, the Temple of Doom minecart scene, it is not. More like the acid trip minecart scene. First of all, it sure is convenient that this rabbit showed up, or else they wouldn't have earplugs to defend against Alameda Slim. But secondly, what the heck is this shot?
What even is that perspective? Like, what was that animation? It did not match at all. Did not make any sense.
How does this buffalo survive this fall? How do the trio survive this fall? Why is there a room filled with 1,000,000 explosives right next to the tracks? Did no one ever consider the exact event that sets these ablaze when they put them here?
This is the part of the movie where it's just stuff happening. Okay, but who has that much TNT in one location?
Additionally, if this collision here is enough to destroy the minecart, why are the 3 cows and Alameda Slim completely unharmed?
I do not know.
There's no way they should have survived that.
Maggie.
You survived.
Surprised?
And all while these morons yell Alameda Slim's name on repeat in what I can only assume is an attempt to destroy our sanity.
Uncle Slim! Uncle Slim!
A few minutes later. 8 hours later.
The only dialogue these characters have is Uncle Slim! Uncle Slim! As they chase him down, like... It's not even funny.
At long last, though, the chaos comes to an end, and unfortunately this is essentially the last we'll see of Evil Rockotar. It's also more or less the last we'll see of Rico. Bet you already forgot he was even in the movie. But unfortunately, before he disappears from this movie, we get this incredibly dumb twist villain reveal scene.
Guess what? I'm the bad guy.
What? Big to the problem, number 10. Rico is a dummy, twisty villain. I tell you, Rico being a villain here is so insanely pointless that I cannot comprehend what they were thinking doing this. First of all, if he was working with the villain in the first place, then why was he out to get him with the other people sent by the sheriff? Because last we saw, he was working with them. I mean, he's literally helped the sheriff catch other criminals. This seems like a very poor way to keep one's true motive secret. It's almost like they only showed him working against the villain to make it impossible to guess that he was the villain. And on top of that, what does him being a villain add to the story? I'll tell you.
Nothing!
Since he's just a crony of the true villain, who we will already have been rooting against this whole time, it doesn't change anything about the plot.
But what about Buck's reaction? That's important, isn't it?
I hear you saying. And to that I say, that's literally the worst part of this reveal. Why? because it's a very poor attempt to try and shoehorn in some sort of message about how idols aren't always what they seem. But the execution is so two-dimensional that it causes the message to miss the mark entirely, since the only thing you can truly gauge from this message is that the heroes you look up to will betray you. Better to do your own thing. Which is not only essentially just saying that you shouldn't have role models, it also fails even worse because of it being attached to Buck's character. Someone who is extremely flawed and selfish. This message doesn't do anything to help him overcome his character flaw. In fact, it does the exact opposite.
Well, think again.
Like, look, even when this character should be being humbled for making a mistake, he's still obsessed over himself.
It essentially tells him as a character that he doesn't need to change who he is and how he behaves, and that he should just continue to act the same selfish way for all eternity. This ties into his utterly abysmal redemption by helping him to free the cow ladies and head off to save the farm. It's as if him suddenly helping the cows here makes up for how awfully he treated them before.
You think I'm just gonna put up with that bull? No. Alright, no. No, I'm not gonna put up with it. I'm not gonna put up with it. I'm drawing the line in the sand. No!
But no, he never tries to change his ways, and he never truly feels sorry for his mistakes before, if he even acknowledges them in the first place. Ah, yes. We finally reached that part I was teasing earlier.
So the only reason this character has a hat is so they can have a joke earlier in the movie where she gets so angry about the hat that she rams a character, just so that at this point in the movie, she can get angry at the hat to ram themselves out of a situation.
But you know, I've already explained why this is not very good writing, so I won't go over all that again. Oh, and remember when I said it would be the last we would see of those villain characters? I genuinely meant that. Because the main characters literally just tie them up and leave them here. It is never actually resolved what happened to them. Did the sheriff come and pick them up? Did they just untie themselves and escape? Because no one was back there watching them. It kind of reminds me of how the Rescuers Down Under doesn't tie up whether Cody gets to see his mother again, which is debatably the weakest element of that otherwise amazing movie. But here, of course, it's just yet another problem on top of the massive pile already building up. Just thought it was worth mentioning. Well, with that aside, next I would like to direct your attention to yet another coincidence. Technically a coincidence and a convenience at the same time. The fact that these cows, 1, have the train perfectly ready for them to catch up with the villain, 2, that this train just so happens to go right past their house.
More convenience, the train goes right past the patch of heaven.
And I mean right past it. And 3, they even have the knowledge and ability to drive the train in the first place. Isn't it great? All these things happen to line up for them.
Can anything in this movie happen because of the characters actually doing something? Or does the plot only progress because things conveniently work out for them? British character gives a big speech. Oh, also, why is she British anyways? I mean, this is America.
Oh, and on the way back, we are forced to endure some more cringe from these creep cows.
Yeah, we really needed to bring back these guys because they were so funny the first time.
Whose idea was it to bring these guys back after the initial scene they were in? The joke wasn't even funny in the first place, but it's especially not funny when all they have to say is basically just the same stuff they already said previously. Repeating a joke beat for beat is not funny. It's just lazy and cringy. So then this scene happens where another train is coming right at the main character's train, but luckily there is another track just up ahead they could switch to. But oh no, it looks like the stick broke for inexplicable reasons, forcing Rabbit Boy over here to use his peg leg instead. Good luck getting that out. Did I mention that the only reason any of this drama even happens is to force the horse and rabbit characters out of the finale of the movie? Like, that is literally the only reason they could have to add this scene. It really does show you just how worthless both of these characters are to the main plot, that neither of them are actually needed for the finale. In fact, dare I say, you could easily have the plot happen virtually the same without either of them. I tell you, Buck spends more time trying to stop our main characters than actually help them. I'm fairly certain he was just added to pad the runtime. And without him in the movie, you'd have no need for the rabbit, since literally the only important thing he actually does is conveniently show them where the villain is. And they only couldn't find the villain because the horse tried to throw them off his trail in that other stupid scene. Well, I guess they technically also get some furry earplugs from his tail, but I'm sure if he wasn't there, they probably would have just found a convenient barrel of wool sitting around instead. And obviously, you could remove this entire scene here if neither of those characters existed. And now, we finally reach the finale. But I just want to mention, first of all, how hilarious it is that they went to save the farm, but they end up destroying part of it when they crash. Kind of defeats the purpose.
These cows sure must love their farm if they're willing to drive a train into it. They've totally not done, like, a massive amount of money's worth of damage or anything. Totally going against the whole purpose of saving it in the first place.
Do they not realize they will now need more money than the reward cash to actually restore the farm on top of saving it?
We did it, Patrick! We saved the city!
Anyway, time for the worst final battle ever. Not only does this final battle take place on a farm, quite possibly the most unepic final battle location ever.
This has got to be probably the least epic final battle of any Disney movie ever.
But it also involves more yodeling and various shenanigans from the other animals, making the whole thing into a joke. Even for a movie that tries to be comedic, this is just dumb. And nothing is dumber than the villain ultimately being beaten by Grace literally moon jumping into the air and karate kicking a cow horn into Alameda Slim's mouth.
What am I watching?
Oh, and speaking of Grace moon jumping and karate kicking, how can she suddenly do this? Not once in this entire movie up to this point has Grace being able to do athletic feats or karate ever been a thing. This is exactly the kind of thing I mean when I say the writers hand the characters the key to a locked door right when they need it. Because they are literally just inventing abilities for the main characters to beat the main villain right at the last second because they couldn't be bothered to come up with a logical explanation. And as if what you just watched wasn't already stupid enough, I would like to point out a massive oversight on the writers during this part. Remember that idiotic joke from before where the terrible trio couldn't tell who Alameda Slim actually was when he was in his disguise? And the whole point of that joke is that the trio are incredibly dumb because that disguise is not even that good. So how come the sheriff can't tell who Alameda Slim is when he's wearing his disguise?
The fact that this disguise actually tricks the sheriff, okay, that's just beyond cartoon logic at that point.
This implies he is just as stupid as the terrible trio because he can't see through Alameda Slim's disguise.
It's Alameda Slim.
No. And don't give me some nonsense like, well, maybe he's never seen what he looks like. He is elusive after all. Yeah, okay. But he has a picture of his face on the wall outside his office, something you'll likely see every day. I'm calm now. What are you worried about? I'm calm. I can be calm. Stop fussing. Oh, and another thing that never gets properly resolved is what exactly happens to all the land that Alameda Slim bought up. Does it get returned to all the people who sold it? Because I'm certain a lot of them probably moved away after they sold their land. Does the sheriff now own it by default? Is he really the true person who profits from this entire endeavor despite doing virtually nothing? Just more unanswered questions. And well, after that, it's just basically the wrap-up.
The farm is saved, and never mind the tons of damage that was done to the property in the process.
And we start with another poor man's attempt at drama by having a fake-out character departure, that being Maggie here. First of all, why does this movie think we would get emotional over the thought of her leaving? Good riddance is what I would say. Of course, this is all fakery and she hasn't really gone. But quite frankly, I don't know why she wants to stay anyways. Maggie should have no reason to stay. She has never shown making any real bond with the other cows worthy of wanting to stay with them. The movie is so preoccupied with being funny.
Which ain't easy when your chaps are labeled XXXXL.
Comedy.
That they forgot to add any real bonding scenes to show that she actually cares about the others. It seems more likely she's just staying out of either obligation or because she has nowhere better to go. Oh, also, they have to throw in yet another burp joke just for good measure because we obviously haven't suffered enough.
She was a cow like no other.
I just love watching the side characters praise the most unlikable character in the movie. It's a really satisfying scene to watch. Oh, and she has to burp too because reasons, you know. Of course, every single one of the animals from the farm got first place, you know.
Oh, and of course I can't forget to mention that other problem, a problem which I hinted at early on in this review. A problem similar to one that the Aristocats has, in that virtually none of the main characters actually learn anything by the end of the movie, even though the movie wants you to think that they have. Cause don't you just love when the filmmakers use tricks to manipulate your emotions, despite the script being so poor that everything they want you to feel wasn't earned? Boy, I sure do love that.
Like, apparently, all these characters were already perfect from the start, and all those arguments they had along the way, that was just bonding, you know, that they didn't learn anything, you know, because arguments lead to bonding, you know, even when none of them are resolved properly, you know.
Well, look what the cow dragged in. It's the idiot, creep, fake love interests, my favorite characters. And this is by far their worst appearance, which is ironic because they say less here. But it is worse because this scene completely misses the point of their characters in the first place. At least the only point that would actually make any sense. That they are supposed to be a mockery of fake flirtatious men who fail at being attractive and come off as more creepy than anything else. Which is exactly what these characters are.
What? Like, what even is the whole idea with these idiot guy cows? Why are they even in the movie? Literally every time they show up, it's one of the cringiest scenes. They're trying to force some sort of, like, romance between them? That's the worst relationships of all time. All they've done is be creeps.
So that is why I have to ask, if the whole point of these creep cows is to make fun of idiots who think their fake flirtations are actually attractive, then why do they end up with the main characters in the end?
I'm gonna be with you forever and ever and ever.
Doesn't this defeat the entire purpose of their characters? Also, the buffalo/bison character reappears because each of our main characters has to have a love interest. Don't you know? This is a Disney movie. Everyone has to have a love interest, no matter how pointless, and even when it doesn't make any sense and actively goes against the personalities and characters and the story being told. Excuse me, I think evil Rockotar might have taken over my mind for a second there. I'm okay now. Oh, also, I have to question whether the farm lady actually cares about her cows, considering it's not until now that she actually gives them their own unique stalls.
So, does this part where she adds sections for all of them imply that neither of her two cows she had previously had their own sections before?
Seems like a lousy reward for saving her entire farm. More like something they should have had in the first place. Not to mention it just adds more evidence to why Maggie really shouldn't care as much as this movie wants us to think she does. Imagine saving the world and your reward was free healthcare. I mean, that's such a basic need. It would be ridiculous if everyone didn't have access to such a thing. In conclusion, this movie is a complete and utter disaster.
Enough said.
No, really, that's the best way to sum up this movie. Okay, but for real, the movie completely and utterly fails at pretty much everything it attempts to do. It's a comedy that isn't funny, it has songs that serve no purpose, it has a cast of main characters who fail to leave any positive impressions on its audience, it has a villain who doesn't make any sense, it tries to be cartoonish, but overdoes it so much that it just becomes incomprehensible nonsense most of the time, the plot is extremely forced and almost never progresses naturally, almost always being swayed by luck and pure chance. Some of its characters are so pointless, you question why they're even in the movie. Even Buck, a seemingly important character due to his large screen time, could fairly easily be written out of the movie due to how pointless all the subplots in this movie are. And that's another point I ought to mention. The plot of this movie is stretched thin. If you took out all the pointless characters and scenes in this movie, it would probably be 45 minutes long. And so, it just feels like so much of the movie only really exists to shorten our lifespans and fill the runtime. Okay, so, right here was originally going to be an entire 5.5 minute long section of me explaining how to fix the problems with this movie into an actually good version of the movie, kind of like what I did in my Ralph Breaks the Internet video at the end. But quite frankly, it was too long, and I'm kind of just dying from editing this massive video, so I'll just give you the TLDR version of the fixed movie. Basically, the rabbit, horse, and Rico are deleted from the movie. The 3 cows are humans because they never need to be animals in the first place. Maggie's owner is now her father, and he dies when Alameda Slim attacks. This gives her a connection to the other 2, whose father would have also died, replacing the idea of them losing their farms with something more emotional and actually making a connection between those things, which for some reason, the original movie never makes a connection between the idea of them losing their farms as a way to bond. You know, all they do is spend arguing instead, But anyways, instead of yodeling, Alameda Slim has a magical instrument, and it's Maggie's selfishness that ultimately causes them to not be able to catch Alameda Slim at first, and when they ultimately do catch him, she selflessly jumps in the way of Alameda's attack on one of the other two, thus redeeming herself for her past actions, by proving that she now values other people more than just herself. And voila, happy ending. There you go, fixed home on the range. Oh, and before I end this video once and for all, I have one final grievance I would like to make. That being that I hold this movie as the primary culprit for the death of 2D animation in film. Sure, you can point to things like Pixar and DreamWorks' massive success, or the failure of Treasure Planet at the box office, but those things are examples of executives and audiences believing 3D is the future, or in the case of Treasure Planet, sheer sabotage from Disney to ensure the failure of the movie for their 3D agenda.
This effort is no longer profitable!
But this movie is different. It wasn't much of a success. But what it did to 2D animation was arguably worse. It didn't just make traditional animation appear outdated or unprofitable compared to 3D. It makes it look childish and stupid in comparison. This movie is guilty of making audiences believe the lie Disney was trying to push, that CGI 3D animation is for everyone, but traditional hand-drawn 2D animation is only for little kids. Never mind the insane amount of care, talent, and patience required to even make traditional animation, because apparently that doesn't matter. If it's 2D, it's for kids, and if you disagree, you are objectively wrong. I personally blame this movie for obliterating the reputation of 2D animation by making it look bad in comparison to 3D movies from around the same time. And that is perhaps the most infuriating thing about this movie. Nothing that actually happens in the film, but its impact on society and the way people see styles of animation. After this, Disney would only go on to make 2 more traditionally animated movies, The Princess and the Frog and Winnie the Pooh 2011, before ultimately abandoning their roots. The thing that made them rich and famous in the first place. All because they cared more about profit than art.
I'm just plumb out of ideas.
That line is very fitting for modern Disney.
Well, that certainly was a journey. Oh, and if you're wondering what I'm doing out here instead of the usual place where I record my outros, which is my room, by the way, that is because my room has simply become too cramped recently, and I needed some fresh air. Oh, and I would like to know what your guys' thoughts are on the reaction bits I threw into this video, since it's something new that I haven't tried before, so I'm not certain if it'll actually catch on or if you guys actually liked it or not. So please tell me if it was good or if I shouldn't bother in the future, because it did take a little bit extra time to add that stuff in. Oh, and of course I can't forget to give a big thank you to all my patrons and channel members. Ed, Tyke, Macabre Mole, In7X Voss, Gregory Bronstein, Samir A, Edward P, Emperor Roku, and Calabunga. If you enjoyed the video, then of course I must remind you there is a like button somewhere down there. You could also press the other button next to it, and no, I'm not talking about the dislike button. But you know, only if you want to eventually see me cover the Pixar Unholy Trinity one day. There's also a million other things you could follow me on somewhere around me. You know, all the social media thingies. I also have another YouTube channel for gaming videos, but I post like once in a blue moon, so like, subscribe if you want, but don't expect a lot of content. And of course, last but not least, I have to recommend that you also watch this video if you have the time, this video being my previous release about Toy Story 1, which did not get as many views as I was hoping, if I'm being honest. Or of course, if you missed the previous Unholy Trinity videos, then there's a playlist over here leading to those, so that you can see the whole series. Well, anyways, always remember to be iconic.